Princess Eloria lived in the Grand Palace of Elisara, a beautiful planet known for its advanced technology and shining cities. The palace was filled with tall marble halls, sparkling fountains, and vast gardens that stretched as far as the eye could see. Every corner of Elisara spoke of power and tradition. Yet, despite all the grandeur, Eloria's heart remained quietly distant from the royal life expected of her. For many years, suitors from far-off worlds arrived at the palace, each hoping to win her hand in marriage. They were noble warriors, brilliant scientists, and wealthy dignitaries from diverse alien races. They came with promises of strength, wisdom, and endless prosperity for the kingdom. However, each time, Princess Eloria politely turned them away. She believed that love was not a matter of status or duty, but of true connection. No fancy words or grand displays could fill the emptiness of a forced life. Every day, the palace bustled with activity. Courtiers hurried along the marble corridors, preparing for lavish ceremonies. The royal advisors arranged meetings and celebrations to honor the guests. But while the palace was alive with noise and excitement, Eloria preferred the quiet solitude of her private garden. This garden was her secret refuge, a place where she could think, dream, and read the old tales of a simpler time. In the garden, the princess often wandered among bright, fragrant flowers and beside gentle, bubbling streams. It was there that she remembered stories of true love and friendship, stories passed down from generation to generation. Eloria wished for a life where she could share laughter and simple joys without the weight of royal expectations. She longed for someone who would see her for who she was, not just as a symbol of power or a prize to be won. One soft morning, as sunlight danced on the dew-covered petals, Eloria sat quietly on a stone bench. She listened to the sound of birds and the murmur of the wind. Her heart felt calm, yet she wondered if true love ever really existed. Nearby, an old gardener worked slowly among the flower beds. His hands were rough from years of care, but his smile was kind and warm. When he greeted her with a gentle "Good morning, princess," his sincere tone filled the space between them. Though he was not a suitor, his simple kindness reminded Eloria of the love she dreamed about. That day, as the palace continued with its usual bustle, the princess's thoughts grew clearer. She realized that none of the flashy visitors had ever shown her the gentle compassion she craved. In her heart, she believed that one day someone different would come, a person who valued honesty, simplicity, and the beauty of small moments over extravagant displays of power. And so, quietly, Princess Eloria held on to her hope. In the midst of tradition and expectation, she waited patiently for the love that would finally fill her life with true meaning. Under the bright blue sky of Elisara, the calm day was suddenly interrupted by an unusual sound. A small, sturdy spaceship touched down in the Grand Palace courtyard. It was not like the elegant, gleaming vessels that usually carried important alien guests. This ship was plain, with a few scratches on its metal body, evidence of long journeys through distant galaxies. The palace guards and courtiers stopped in their tracks, their curious eyes fixed on this unexpected arrival. The spaceship door opened slowly with a soft hiss. Out stepped a man who looked both humble and determined. He was Captain Marcus Hale from Earth, a planet known for its strength and hard work. Marcus did not wear a fancy uniform or carry ornate gifts. Instead, he wore a well-worn jacket and simple clothes that spoke of his modest origins. His warm smile and steady eyes gave him a calm confidence that immediately set him apart from the usual visitors. The palace guards, dressed in their ornate ceremonial armor, exchanged surprised glances. They had seen many alien guests with bright colors, elaborate costumes, and impressive devices. But Marcus was different. His plain appearance and relaxed manner made him seem genuine and approachable. The courtiers whispered among themselves, wondering how a simple human could be sent as an envoy from such a distant world. Princess Eloria, who often sought the quiet of her private garden, was drawn to the commotion. Stepping into the bustling courtyard, she saw Marcus standing confidently among the gathered crowd. Their eyes met for a moment, And in that brief glance, Eloria sensed a quiet strength and sincere kindness that was rare in the glittering world of Elisara. Unlike the other guests who came with grand promises and extravagant displays, Marcus carried only honesty and hope. Taking a slow step forward, Marcus raised his hand in greeting and spoke in a clear, simple voice. "Greetings. I am Marcus Hale, a representative from Earth. I come in peace, with a desire for friendship and understanding." His words were plain, yet each syllable carried a sincere tone that resonated with everyone present. Even those who were used to the formal speeches of alien dignitaries found his introduction refreshingly straightforward. The head of the palace council, an elder with kind eyes and a calm demeanor, stepped forward next. "Welcome to Elisara, Captain Marcus," he said with respectful warmth. "Your arrival is noted with honor, and we look forward to learning about your world." The gathered crowd murmured softly, and even the sternest guard allowed a small smile to appear on his face. As Marcus was escorted toward the grand hall for further discussion, the atmosphere in the palace shifted subtly. Whispers spread among the people, and many exchanged glances filled with quiet excitement. In that moment, Elisara felt the stirrings of change. Princess Eloria watched him as he walked away, her heart quietly lifting at the thought that perhaps, at last, someone had come who could bring a new light to her world. The arrival of Captain Marcus opened a door to possibilities that no one had expected, and the kingdom braced itself for the promise of a new beginning. At the Grand Palace, the evening of the royal celebration was filled with bright lights, lively music, and soft chatter from the many guests. The ball was held in a magnificent hall with high ceilings and sparkling chandeliers. While everyone danced and laughed, Princess Eloria sat quietly at a small table in a corner. Even though noble suitors in their splendid costumes flitted around her, their grand words and formal greetings did not reach her heart. She longed for a moment of truth, a simple, honest connection. As the night grew deeper, Captain Marcus Hale made his way through the crowd. His plain clothes and modest manner stood out in a room full of glittering costumes and polished etiquette. Whispers filled the air as he passed by, but he paid no mind to the curiosity around him. Instead, Marcus looked for a quiet place to think away from the busy chatter. His calm eyes and friendly smile showed a sincerity that was hard to ignore. Feeling the weight of the formal event, Princess Eloria decided to take a walk in the palace gardens. The cool night air, filled with the scent of blooming flowers, offered a welcome escape from the noise of the hall. The moonlight gently lit the winding paths, and the soft sound of a small fountain created a peaceful background. As she walked along a quiet path, she noticed a lone figure sitting near the fountain. It was Captain Marcus. Marcus had left the grand hall some time ago, seeking a moment of calm where he could collect his thoughts. He noticed the princess approaching and stood to greet her. "Good evening, Princess," he said softly. "I thought this quiet place might be a better spot than the busy hall." His voice was warm and sincere, and in that simple greeting, Eloria felt a spark of hope. Surprised by his kind words and genuine manner, Eloria smiled and replied, "Yes, this place feels real, much more honest than the noise inside." Together, they found a comfortable bench near the fountain and began to talk. They spoke of everyday things, the beauty of the night, the scent of the flowers, and the simple pleasures of life that the princess rarely allowed herself to feel. Marcus told her about Earth, a planet where people valued hard work, simple acts of kindness, and genuine connections over fancy words or grand gestures. Eloria listened with interest as he described how life on Earth was full of hope and small, yet important, moments. In return, she shared her quiet dreams and the loneliness she felt despite the bright ceremonies and elegant suitors. She confessed that she longed for a life where each day felt true and heartfelt. Their conversation was free of the usual formality that filled the palace. They laughed quietly, discovered shared dreams, and found comfort in each other's honesty. In that soft, moonlit garden, the walls of tradition began to crumble. Princess Eloria felt that finally, she had found someone who understood her, a person who saw beyond royal duty to the real heart beneath. In that unplanned encounter, both Marcus and Aloria sensed that something new was beginning. Their meeting, simple yet profound, marked the start of a change that could one day alter the fate of the entire kingdom. The next morning, the grand palace of Elisara was filled with the usual buzz of royal affairs. Courtiers hurried through the long corridors, whispering about the night before. The noble suitors were growing impatient, waiting for Princess Aloria's favor. Many of them had performed elaborate displays of skill and strength, hoping to impress her. Some had gifted her rare gemstones from distant galaxies, while others had showcased advanced technology that could benefit her kingdom. Yet none of it moved the princess. Aloria, however, could not stop thinking about her conversation with Captain Marcus Hale. His words had been different, honest, simple, and full of warmth. Unlike the other suitors, he did not try to impress her with wealth or power. He spoke of life, of small joys, and of a world where people were valued for their hearts, not their status. It was something she had never experienced before. That afternoon, the Royal Council arranged a grand event where the suitors would demonstrate their abilities. It was a tradition in Elisara. Those who wished to marry the princess had to prove themselves through trials of strength, intelligence, and leadership. The noble warriors showed off their combat skills, wielding glowing energy swords and powerful plasma rifles. The scholars displayed advanced calculations, proving their strategic minds. Every suitor fought to be the best, believing that victory would bring them closer to Aloria's heart. Marcus, however, remained in the background, observing the event with quiet amusement. He had no interest in playing by their rules, yet something inside him stirred. The princess deserved more than just a show of strength. She deserved someone who truly cared. Then, an unexpected accident occurred. One of the palace's energy shields malfunctioned, sending a powerful electric surge across the courtyard. The crowd gasped in shock as a group of palace staff became trapped in the unstable energy field. Panic spread as no one knew how to stop it. The noble suitors hesitated, unsure of what to do. Without a second thought, Marcus sprang into action. He rushed forward, ignoring the danger. Instead of relying on fancy technology, he used quick thinking and instinct. He found an emergency control panel hidden behind the main power grid and manually cut off the energy supply. The force field flickered and disappeared, releasing the trapped workers. The crowd fell silent. The noble suitors, who had been so eager to prove their worth, had done nothing. But this human, who was not even trying to compete, had stepped forward without hesitation. Princess Aloria watched in awe. Marcus had shown more courage and selflessness in a single moment than all the suitors combined. He did not act for glory or recognition. He simply did what was right. For the first time, Aloria felt a certainty in her heart. This man was different, and perhaps, just perhaps, he was the one she had been waiting for all along. The news of Captain Marcus Hale's quick thinking spread across the palace like wildfire. The noble suitors, once confident in their abilities, now whispered among themselves, uneasy about the human's unexpected heroism. Princess Aloria, however, remained silent, her mind replaying the moment he had risked himself to save the trapped workers. Unlike the other suitors, Marcus had no desire to prove himself, yet his actions spoke louder than any grand display. The Royal Council, too, had taken notice. While some elders admired Marcus's courage, others remained skeptical. "A human may act with bravery," one advisor murmured, "but bravery alone does not make a worthy ruler." The king, Aloria's father, agreed. He wanted his daughter to marry someone capable of leading a kingdom, not just someone who could act in the heat of the moment. Thus, a new challenge was announced: the trial of wisdom. The suitors would be presented with a real problem faced by the kingdom, one that required intelligence, creativity, and leadership to solve. It was a test that could not be won with strength alone. The challenge was revealed. Elisara's energy grid, which powered their cities, had been unstable for years. The royal engineers had struggled to find a permanent solution. The suitors were given one day to analyze the problem and propose a fix. The one with the best solution would win the trial. The noble suitors immediately gathered in groups, calling upon their scholars and engineers to assist them. They used advanced technology, complex calculations, and alien logic to construct their answers. Each suitor hoped to impress the royal court with their knowledge. Marcus, however, worked differently. He had no advanced technology, no team of scholars. He only had his experience as a space pilot and his human problem-solving instincts. Instead of relying on complex theories, he studied the kingdom's energy system with his own eyes, walking through the power stations and speaking with the workers who maintained them. As the deadline approached, the suitors proudly presented their solutions, each more complicated than the last. Some suggested building entirely new energy cores, while others proposed using rare cosmic elements to stabilize the grid. Their ideas, though impressive, would take years to complete. Then it was Marcus's turn. Stepping forward, he spoke plainly. Your energy grid isn't failing because it's outdated. It's failing because of small but constant inefficiencies. Instead of replacing the entire system, we should improve what's already here. Simple upgrades to the wiring and cooling mechanisms will stabilize the grid immediately. The council fell silent. His solution was not the grandest, but it was the most practical, one that could be implemented now, without waiting for complex technologies. Princess Eloria smiled. Once again, Marcus had done what no one else had. He saw the simple truth in a problem where others only saw an opportunity to showcase their intelligence. In that moment, she realized something. Marcus wasn't trying to impress her. He was simply being himself. And that was exactly why he was winning her heart. The evening air was cool as Princess Eloria walked alone in the royal gardens, her mind filled with thoughts of Captain Marcus Hale. He had surprised everyone, not just with his courage, but with his simple yet brilliant solution to the energy crisis. Unlike the other suitors, who focused on making themselves look superior, Marcus simply did what made sense. There was no arrogance in him, no desire for praise, only a quiet confidence and a willingness to help. She found him by the fountain, just as she had before. He sat on the stone bench, gazing at the night sky, deep in thought. The soft glow of Elisara's twin moons cast gentle shadows on his face. Eloria hesitated for a moment before stepping closer. "You seem lost in thought, Captain," she said softly. Marcus turned and smiled. "Just thinking about how different this world is from mine," he replied. "Back on Earth, we don't have grand palaces or suitors competing for a princess, but we do have something just as valuable: determination, resilience, and the belief that anything can be figured out if we try hard enough." Eloria sat beside him, folding her hands in her lap. "That is what fascinates me about humans," she admitted. "You don't wait for miracles. You create solutions, even when the odds are against you." Marcus chuckled. "That's because humans don't have the luxury of waiting. Our history is filled with struggles, wars, disasters, challenges. But every time, we adapt. We find a way." For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence. Eloria, usually surrounded by people who only spoke in formalities, found Marcus's words refreshing. He didn't try to impress her. He spoke to her as a person, not as a princess. "Tell me about your world," she asked. "Not the wars or the struggles. Tell me about the things that make Earth home." Marcus's expression softened. "Home," he repeated, looking up at the sky, as if he could see his distant planet from here. "It's the sound of rain tapping against a window on a quiet night. The smell of fresh-baked bread from a small-town bakery. The laughter of children playing in the streets. It's not the technology or the power that makes Earth special. It's the small moments that remind us we're alive." Eloria felt something stir inside her. All her life, she had been surrounded by wealth, power, and duty. Yet, in Marcus's words, she heard something she had never truly experienced: the beauty of an ordinary life. She turned to him, her voice softer than before. "Marcus, have you ever been in love?" He looked at her, surprised by the question. Then, After a pause, he smiled. Not in the way the stories describe, but I believe love isn't about grand gestures or destiny. It's about finding someone who makes life feel real. Eloria's heart beat a little faster. For the first time in her life, she wondered, could love be this simple? 2 seconds. The days in Elisara passed peacefully, but beneath the surface, tension was growing. The royal court whispered about the strange bond forming between Princess Eloria and the human, Captain Marcus Hale. Some nobles saw it as an insult. How could a mere human, a man with no noble blood, capture the attention of the princess? Others were curious, sensing that Marcus was different from the usual suitors. However, not everyone was content with the changes he brought. Beyond the palace walls, danger lurked. Elisara had long been a target of the Zivar Dominion, a rival faction that sought control over its rich resources. The Zivarians, a warrior race known for their cruelty, had long waited for a moment of weakness to strike. And now, with the princess distracted and the suitors in disarray, they saw their opportunity. Late one night, as Marcus stood on one of the palace balconies, enjoying the cool night air, he overheard two royal guards whispering in hushed voices. The Zivar Dominion's fleet was spotted near the outer borders, one said. They haven't attacked, but they're watching us. Marcus's instincts sharpened. He had spent years traveling through the galaxy and knew what a waiting enemy meant. They were preparing for something big. He needed to warn Eloria. The next morning, he found her in the garden, her usual place of peace. She smiled when she saw him, but Marcus's expression was serious. "We need to talk," he said. Eloria listened carefully as Marcus explained what he had heard. The Zivarians aren't just passing by. They're testing your defenses, waiting for the right moment to attack. You need to prepare. The princess frowned. The council has always handled such matters. They will negotiate. Marcus shook his head. Negotiation won't stop them. If they think they can take Elisara, they will. You can't wait until it's too late. For the first time, Eloria felt a deep worry settle in her chest. Marcus's warning carried weight. He wasn't just guessing. He had seen war before. He knew the signs of an incoming invasion. Later that day, Eloria called for an emergency council meeting. The noble suitors were present, each eager to prove their worth in the face of a threat. Some argued for diplomacy, others for war, but none of them had a real plan. Then Marcus stepped forward. Your defenses are strong, but predictable. If the Zivarians attack, they'll target the outer energy stations first, cutting off your power before moving in. You need a counter-strategy, something they won't expect. The council fell silent. Eloria, watching him, felt something shift inside her. The suitors spoke in theories and tradition, but Marcus spoke from experience. For the first time, she realized, he wasn't just the man who had captured her heart. He was the one who could save her world. The news spread quickly. Zivarian ships were spotted on the horizon. The royal court buzzed with fear and urgency, and the palace halls, once filled with the sound of music and celebration, now echoed with the hurried footsteps of messengers and advisors. The suitors, sensing an opportunity to prove their worth, scrambled to come up with plans. Each noble alien championed their own strategy, showcasing intricate battle maps and grand speeches. But Princess Eloria's mind was elsewhere. While the suitors spoke of bold assaults and diplomatic maneuvers, her thoughts returned to Marcus. He wasn't in the council chambers that morning. Instead, she found him in the palace hangar, working with a group of palace guards. The hangar was cluttered with ships, tools, and crates of equipment, but it was clear Marcus had a purpose. As she approached, she watched him instruct the guards, showing them a set of old Earth-made signal devices he had brought with him. They looked crude compared to Elisara's advanced technology, but Marcus's calm explanations made it clear these devices could still play a vital role. "Marcus," she called softly. He turned and smiled, his hand still holding a worn comms panel. "Princess, I didn't think you'd leave the council meeting." Eloria stepped closer. I needed to see what you were doing." Marcus motioned to the guards. "The suitors have their strategies, but no one's thinking about communication. If the Xaverians disrupt our main lines, we'll be blind. These backup devices might be old, but they'll keep us connected in a worst-case scenario." The princess tilted her head. "You think differently from the others. You don't try to impress me with grand plans. You just find the simplest solution." He set down the panel and looked her in the eyes. "Aloria, wars aren't won with speeches and shiny gadgets. They're won by people who adapt, who use what they have to keep each other safe. I'm not here to outshine the suitors. I'm here because you and your people deserve to make it through this." Aloria felt her heart ache. For so long, she had been surrounded by those who sought her hand for power or status. Marcus was different. He didn't see her as a prize. He saw her as a person worth protecting. That night, as the suitors continued to argue in the council chambers, Aloria made a decision. She stood before the gathered nobles and her advisors, her voice calm but firm. "We will implement Captain Marcus's recommendations. His experience and judgment are what we need now. This isn't about showing strength. It's about survival." The suitors stared, their pride wounded, but they knew they couldn't argue. The princess had made her choice. As Marcus coordinated the new defenses, Aloria stayed by his side, lending her own insight and authority. Together, they rallied the palace guards and the people of Elisara. For the first time, it felt like the kingdom was truly united, standing behind a human who cared more about their survival than his own gain. Aloria knew the battle ahead would be difficult, but with Marcus leading the charge, she felt something new. The sound of distant engines rumbled across the horizon. Elisara's skies darkened as the Xaverian fleet moved into position. From the royal palace's balcony, Princess Aloria watched the gathering storm of ships. Beside her stood Marcus, his expression calm, though his eyes were sharp and alert. Around them, the palace was alive with activity. Guards hurried to their stations, backup generators hummed to life, and the suitors stood in tense groups, their earlier confidence replaced with unease. "What are you thinking?" Aloria asked quietly, glancing at Marcus. He studied the scene before answering. "I'm thinking they're testing our resolve. They want us to panic. If we do, they'll strike hard. But if we stand firm, they might hesitate. This is as much a battle of will as it is of weapons." Aloria nodded. She had always relied on her advisors and the strength of her kingdom, but this moment felt different. It wasn't the suitors, with their polished strategies, who gave her comfort. It was Marcus, unwavering, practical, and willing to face the unknown without fear. The suitors, meanwhile, continued to argue in the council chamber. Some demanded an immediate counterattack. Others called for negotiations. The nobles who had once paraded their skills now seemed uncertain, each afraid to make the wrong choice. Marcus didn't waste time debating. Instead, he moved through the palace, working directly with the guards and engineers. He tested the backup communication systems, checked the emergency shields, and gave clear instructions that everyone could understand. His leadership wasn't flashy, but it was effective. Slowly, the palace staff and soldiers began to trust him, following his lead without question. By the time the Xaverian fleet approached the outer defenses, Marcus had turned the palace into a well-coordinated stronghold. The first wave of attacks targeted Elisara's energy towers, just as Marcus had predicted. But thanks to the backup systems he'd established, the kingdom's defenses held steady. The suitors, realizing they were being outshone, reluctantly followed Marcus's orders, placing their troops where he suggested and using their resources as he directed. As the battle raged, Aloria stayed close, watching Marcus with quiet admiration. He never sought praise, never demanded recognition. He simply did what needed to be done. The people of Elisara, inspired by his calm determination, fought harder than they ever had before, even as the Xaverians pressed forward. The tide began to turn. By the end of the day, the enemy retreated, their forces weakened and their confidence shaken. The people of Elisara gathered in the palace courtyard, cheering not just for the victory, but for the man who had helped them achieve it. Marcus, however, stood off to the side, looking tired but satisfied. Eloria approached him, her heart full. "You've done more for my kingdom than anyone else ever could," she said softly. "And you did it not for glory, but for what was right." Marcus met her gaze, his smile warm. It was never about proving anything. It was about protecting the people who matter. In that moment, Eloria knew she had found something far more valuable than a royal alliance. She had found a true partner. The dust of battle had settled, leaving behind a kingdom forever changed. The courtyard of the palace was alive with celebration as citizens from all corners of Elisara gathered to honor their defenders. Bright banners fluttered in the wind, and laughter filled the air. The suitors, once proud and haughty, now blended into the crowd, their claims to fame overshadowed by one man's quiet resolve. Princess Eloria stood at the top of the palace steps, looking out over her people. For the first time, she felt a weight lift from her heart. No longer bound by tradition and expectation, she saw a brighter future ahead. But her gaze wasn't focused on the crowd. It was fixed on the human who had changed everything. Marcus Hale stood by the fountain where they'd first spoken. He watched the celebration with a humble smile, his hands tucked into the pockets of his worn jacket. Despite the cheers and the gratitude he received, he had remained the same, steady, honest, and unassuming. Eloria approached him, her long royal robes trailing softly behind her. The crowd's noise seemed to fade as she stood before him. "Captain Hale," she began, her voice warm and clear, "my kingdom owes you more than words can express." Marcus chuckled lightly. "You don't have to call me Captain, Princess. I'm just a guy from Earth who happened to be in the right place at the right time." Eloria shook her head. "You're more than that. You reminded us what truly matters. Not titles, not wealth, not tradition. It's courage, ingenuity, and heart that make a real leader. And you showed us that." Marcus's smile softened. "I only did what I thought was right. If that helped, then I'm glad. But this is your world, your people. They look up to you, Princess. You're the one who will guide them into whatever comes next." For a moment, neither spoke. The two stood quietly, the celebrations carrying on in the background. Then Eloria reached out and gently took his hand. "Marcus," she said, her voice steady and filled with emotion, "this isn't just about what you've done. It's about who you are. You showed me that life is more than duty, more than ceremony. You showed me what it means to truly live, to hope, to dream." She paused, her cheeks warming as she continued. "And that's why I choose you." Marcus blinked, startled by her words. "You're choosing me?" he asked, almost in disbelief. Eloria nodded. "Not because you're the strongest or the smartest, but because you're real. And that's what I want by my side, not just as a leader, but as someone I trust with my heart." The crowd seemed to sense the moment and grew quiet, turning their attention to the pair. Marcus, standing before the princess, looked out at the people of Elisara and then back to Eloria. He smiled, and for the first time in years, he felt completely at home. "Then I choose you too, Eloria," he said simply, "for as long as you'll have me." And in that instant, the line between human and alien, tradition and change, fear and hope, faded away. Together, they stood at the dawn of a new chapter, not just for Elisara, but for themselves and for the galaxy beyond.